Welcome to our Directive programme on the omnibus package. What implications for the EU sustainability credentials and European manufacturers? I'm Brian Maguire here in Washington, DC, joining you this morning. Good afternoon, Brussels. And today our programme is supported by the VDMA. In February, the European Commission launched an omnibus initiative to reduce administrative burdens on Europe's businesses. It also aimed to provide more harmonisation for European market and to make EU industry more competitive. However, the proposal has sparked a lot of controversy, and critics have argued that loosening these regulations could undermine corporate accountability and hinder progress towards the EU's climate goals. Some stakeholders also argued SMEs have not been sufficiently included in the consultation period. Joining us today to discuss this, we have with us Dan Dionisi, Head of Unit for Company Law at the DG Just, the European Commission, Kira Marie Peter Hansen, Member of European Parliament, the Greens in Denmark, Sofia Zakari, Director of Enterprise and Legal Affairs at SME United, Lina Strandvag-Nagel, Deputy Director and Head of Policy at Bologna, Bertram Karloff, President of VDMA, and Lucas Mandel, MEP from the EPP, representing Austria. Welcome to all of you. Great to have you with us. We appreciate the time, and to our audience also. Today, we're going to have a Q&A via Slido. Your hashtag for Slido today is Omnibus Package. You can see the QR screen on the QR code on the screen there. So Omnibus Package. Send us your questions from now on. We're not going to take them just at the end. It's going to be throughout the whole program. And if you have a specific panelist you'd like to address the question to, please note that in the question. And let us know who you are and where you're from, if you would as well, please. That would be great. So please send your questions in anytime from now on, and we'll come to those in about 15 minutes or so and bring those to our panel. The rest of the social media today at EA Debates. You can also see that at the top, hashtag EA Debates, and our social media team will respond and amplify some of those messages today as well. So hashtag EA Debates, you can see at the top of the screen there as well. So for our panelists, we're going to start with a 60-second opener from each, just your key message for the day. Dan, can we kick off with you? 60 seconds.
Yes, thank you, Brian. I'll keep it short. We are talking about an area where our competitiveness agenda intersects with the sustainability imperative. And these two are not in opposition. In fact, if done right, sustainability due diligence can enhance competitiveness. But it's, of course, a matter of balance. And finding the good balance not easy. The corporate sustainability due diligence directive was the
Am I the only one hearing it?
one of its kind.
Dan, if we can come back to you just a moment, Dan. Maybe you can reconnect
across multiple jurisdictions. And there was
Dan, maybe we can come back to you in just a moment if you can try and reconnect there. Kira, can we go to you, please? Kira, so 60 seconds, Kira.
Yes, 60 seconds take on the omnibus, and thanks for inviting me in for this debate. From the Greens EFA side, we say yes to simplification, but we say no to deregulation. And I think as the Commissioner representative was saying, this is about finding the right balance. We are not convinced that the right balance has been found. When you take up such a big amount of the scope without looking at the impact of it, we don't remain convinced that this is purely simplification, but also deregulation. And when we go back from having a risk-based approach to our value chain, this is also not simplification. It's actually making it more burdensome. So we will go into this discussion constructively with an aim to see if we can find a way forward where we actually do simplify, but also keep the aim of the legislation. But we still have a lot to do. Thanks.
Kira, thank you. Sophia.
Yes, thank you very much, Sofia Zakari from SME United. We speak on behalf of craft and SMEs across Europe. So it's needless to say how important is simplification, especially in this area. And for SME, simplification is not about deregulation, but it's about proportionality, about clarification. And I think The process showed that CSRD and due diligence did not take SMEs into account enough. This is one of the reasons why we have the omnibus on the table, and it's important that we all speak together to ensure we deliver to ensure European competitiveness and growth for European SMEs.
Sophia, thank you. Lena.
Thank you very much. As an international climate NGO, our starting point in following the taxonomy and sustainability reporting efforts in the EU from the start has always been to correct the market failure that we are currently facing, and that is a lack of harmonized information on sustainability in Europe. We want to bring competition also to the sphere of sustainability. We already have a range of actors operating in this space, claiming to be sustainable. We need to prevent greenwashing, and we need to ensure a race to the top, not to the bottom. This means that we need to enable companies in different shapes and sizes that want to become more sustainable and to help them access capital or investors with the same interest. And the proposal on sustainability reporting that we see today from the omnibus package is, in our view, a clear example of simplification at the expense of the climate. The market itself has requested transparent information on sustainability, and we need to deliver. And we are in favor of reducing administrative burdens and finding a balance, as has been mentioned by the previous two speakers as well. One size fits all approach is not what's going to work here, but this proposal is simply not ambitious enough in our view.
Thank you, Lena. Bertram.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Bertram Kavlat. I'm elected president of VDMA, which is the European Association of Machinery and Equipment Makers. I'm also managing partner of Schubert and Salsa, which is a mid-sized company producing control valves and exporting these on a worldwide level. Today, I speak for our 3,600 European company members, which are usually SMEs or mid-sized companies, which are usually family-owned and which export around 80% of their goods produced in Europe. We are also the enabler of the transformation of the industry and for decarbonization, so an important factor in the discussion we have overall. I might share some insight also of my own company today, and as VDMA, we explicitly welcome the omnibus from the EU Commission. EU companies, and especially our member companies, are being stifled by the burden of bureaucracy. And we are longing for freedom to get back to innovation and to get back to doing our business. Now, the omnibus, I should say it's late, but not too late. We feel that this proposal goes to the right direction, especially for SMEs, for exporting SMEs. And it will make easier the implementation of CSDDD, CSRD, and the taxonomy, especially for smaller companies, and ease the burden on those companies. So I do hope for broad support of the Parliament in the EU for this omnibus proposal. Thank you.
Bertram, thank you. Lucas.
Thanks for having me. First of all, it's a timely debate we have here today, and it's timely because it's about time that Europe's Commission, Europe's Parliament develop more freedom to the inside. This is what I have been thriving for many years, more freedom to the inside, more strength to the outside. And after the elections last year, we have better majorities in the European Parliament. We have a better European Commission focusing on the two important pillars for our future, economy and security. Security and economy, it's very much connected. Both are clear priorities. We need innovation and production in Europe in order to be competitive, in order to hand over the next generation a prosperous Europe, what we also had inherited from the generations before. This is why I am happy about the omnibus package so far. There will be other omnibus packages as well. I'm not that happy with the title omnibus. It might not have been a marketing expert who has invented this title for it, but more important is the content, and the content is good, but not yet good enough. I very much agree with what Lena has stated already, and I'm pretty confident we will make it better in the European Parliament.
I couldn't agree more with your omnibus comment. Yeah, we could maybe rebrand that a little bit. Dan, do you want to have another go there, see if we can get a better connection for your intro? No. Okay, Dan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear. And apologies, I keep being disconnected and I have to reconnect. Somehow I'm
No
kicked
problem.
out.
Your connection seems strong now, so please go ahead. 60 seconds.
Yes. So what I had started to say, it's really that, in this area where competitive and sustainability intersect, we need to find the right balance, which is not easy. And therefore, the omnibus, building on, what we've heard from the practitioners, limited this with the mandatory due diligence framework, has tried to find a better balance. And if you go through all the changes, even individually, through the changes proposed by the omnibus, see that in each of them, really there is an effort to reduce burden in a meaningful way as much as possible, while sacrifice act still leaning directions transition. Of course,
Okay. Dan, maybe you could try and reconnect on your phone. I think whatever connection there has been interrupted somehow as well. And maybe Zoran, the team, could help Dan reconnect on the phone perhaps as well. And we'll come back again as well. Just to remind you, Slido, if you can send your questions in, it's omnibus package from Slido, and hashtag EA debates for social media as well. So let's take a look at Lena, you remarked about this is welcome, but it was not ambitious enough. Lena, what do you think should be more ambitious in this?
Well, I think that removing for example, in CSRD, removing the reporting removing 80% of the companies there is really removing this great new thing that we had with trying to make sure that there was competitiveness on sustainability. And I think that actually the way it is proposed today, we would actually have a significant reduction in competition and opportunities on sustainable investments. Again, not a race to the top at all. And we're worried that, in fact, this is going to hinder and become a barrier for a lot of actors in economic activities across Europe. So, in fact, if people now or companies want to invest in sustainability, they're actually facing a disadvantage because they actually cannot attract those investors who would be willing to come join them in these efforts.
Well, why do you think the investors are not interested in this regard then? What's really holding them back?
Well, I think they're very interested, but I think that the lack of information or the lack of quality of information and actually ensuring that an investment is in fact sustainable is a barrier. And this is in fact the reason why the financial markets themselves were some of the main drivers of trying to get the sustainability reporting going when it was first initiated.
Okay, Lucas, do you see it that way? Is this the problem for investors, that the quality of the information, the volume of information is not sufficient?
Yeah, I mean, given the circumstances, possible investors remain being reluctant to invest. So what we need is predictability. What we need is an environment of, let's say, perspective for prosperity. For a workforce. We also have demographic winter. So I see the omnibus packages only as, if I compare it with football, as a defense activity. It's means and measures in defense, but we also have to make the one or the other goal. And that means innovation, production, strengthening the workforce. And there will be a lot to do also after the omnibus packages. The omnibus packages are only, let's say, the way to redraw what was just wrong in the last mandate. We have to be true about that. Maybe it's not that easy for the Commission to admit that many things went wrong. Regulation was bad in the last mandate. Crisis management was good. I'm not, let's say, criticizing the former Commission in its entirety. Crisis management was good. Regulation was bad, and that's what we repair now.
Sophia, for SMEs, how is this going to play out? Is the burden of additional reporting going to limit their capacity to be competitive?
No, I think here we have to go back to the beginning of the story. As we had SMEs out of the scope of the CSRD, we had big companies having to report and then, of course, asking their supply chain for information. So the fact that we drafted legislation, we drafted a standard not tailored to SMEs and still asking them those information made them suffer in their competitiveness, because the legislation and the whole landscape was way too complex for them. So having a simplified legislation, having a tailored voluntary standard for SMEs, and ensuring that the market will use this voluntary standard for SMEs will simplify the whole reporting exercise for SMEs and will support them in their growth and competitiveness. But for that, we have to ensure acceptance of the voluntary standard for SMEs, and that goes through large companies and through banks and financial authorities.
Thank you. Dan, some praise there from Lucas that the Commission was willing to reconsider this. Do you think this is a learning exercise, or is just good practice for you to evaluate what needs done better?
Well, we are always learning, of course. We are a learning organization. I'm not sure if I understand that, if I agree that the legislation was bad. There's always room for improving, of course. And I think the omnibus is really a bona fide effort from the Commission, considering also the new international situations in which we found ourselves, the new, let's say, signals coming, because obviously sustainability is not something that the
Again, sorry. Kira, just when it comes to the practical, the concrete dynamics of revising the CSDDD and the CSRD and the EU Taxonomy, what's this going to mean for European manufacturers in real terms? What's the Parliament looking at, and what are you hearing from your constituents?
Well, I think first of all, they're going to look into a year, maybe more, that's going to be super unclear and filled with uncertainty, which I think is a shame. I think this revision could have been done in a better way, where we had the analysis of the first reporting plans. We did an stakeholder involvement, we did an impact assessment, and then we made a revision that made sense. And while doing that, we could do level 2 legislation to do the reporting standards and the guidelines better. Because I think now what I hear mostly is that businesses don't know how to do it, whether they're in scope now or not in scope, what they might be. They don't know what to report on. They don't know whether they should collect data. They don't know what they should do with their investments, which I think is no matter what you then think about the content, is a political a loss and also something that we can't really ask of people outside of these institutions to have no clue on how to conduct their businesses. So I think that is what they are looking into. And then hopefully on the other side of this, my hope is that we will have a clear framework. I share very much what Lina said, that the risk is that we will have different methodologies of how to report. We might have an SME shield, but we might also then have bigger companies saying, well, we don't care about it. We want this information for us to comply, or we want to conduct business in a way. And then we are back to having multiple different ways of doing data collection, methodologies for doing transitions plans, and so on. So my concern is that we will have more uncertainty on the legislation. And thus my hope is that after that we will now take the time to finalize a parliament position and a trilogue position that will actually give clarity and that can hold for more than 3 years at a time.
Thank you. Bertram, is that how you see it? Is that, first of all, we're dealing, as Dan said, with a new era of uncertainty. So we have a global destabilization coming not in small part from this city where I'm residing right now. And that companies are hesitant to invest or to begin any new projects because of that. And now European companies are having to contend with a period of uncertainty and instability in terms of the reporting and the expectations of new legislation. How do you feel about that?
Now, uncertainty seems to become the new normal for our companies. And we had uncertainty due to Corona, due to the Russian war in Ukraine, due to broken supply chains over the last years. That's why many companies, especially SMEs, were very unhappy to get all this additional burden of bureaucracy. Now, let me try to break that down maybe. For the transformation of our industry, to get carbon neutral, we need the products of our member companies, from solar panels to hydrogen to energy efficient machinery. We all produce that, and it's not that the banks will not invest in this industry because our reporting is not good enough, or because there's uncertainty in our ability to do reporting. Banks invest in that business if money is being made. And we have today, after a study amongst our member companies, by the way, this industry is the greatest industrial employer in Europe with more than 3.2 million employees. So we have burdens of bureaucracy cost of around 6% of turnover. That is more than the usual profit of those companies. And the omnibus was extremely important for companies because with a stop the clock approach, our companies would have had to report or to collect 600 data points for CSRD, for example, from early January to be able to report in the next years. So stop the clock was extremely important. Just to give you an impression out of my own company, we have 200 employees. We export 80% in 93 countries. We import from 17 countries. And we have around 500 suppliers in 17 countries with tens of thousands of different articles managed in our small company by 6 persons in the purchasing department. So it would have been very difficult. So especially when we supply to larger companies, there was this triple down effect for which we need the SME shield, because it's different if you do it voluntarily, but to have an SME shield which protects SMEs from the demands of larger companies is very, very helpful, because very often smaller companies don't have the means. In terms of CSDDD, it is very important for our members, for the companies, to limit the scope to tier 1, because we're different from, for example, automotive industry, which purchases large series over years. My member companies purchase small series. Machinery and equipment is small series stuff. Small companies purchasing small series from all over the world. And usually the problems in the supply chains start where hands are being used. And we don't buy raw materials, but we buy prefabricated groups, for example. So the mistakes in the supply chains usually start at the bottom of the supply chains, and machinery and equipment makers are the opposite end. So for small companies, it's close to impossibility to go down the global supply chain down to the very beginning. So we are very dependent on the omnibus, especially with the SME shield, as I said, and the stop the clock approach.
Okay, just on this remote, Bertrand, like 6% of bureaucracy cost. First of all, does that come from European legislation, or is that national legislation specifically as well, separate from that?
Both, because usually the European legislation is put into national law.
But is the balance of that coming from Europe, or is this coming from, is there a heavier, I think if a better way to look at it is country by country, are some countries having a heavier cost for this bureaucracy than others?
With European legislation put into national legislation, there are not too many differences.
Okay. And just finally on this as well, you're talking about the way this reporting happens. Is there a digitalization dimension missing from this as well, where the reporting elements should be more automatic?
There are approaches like the digital product pass, which could help in that respect. But with global supply chains, we are still far from that.
Okay, thank you. Dan, how's our connections? Dan's been struggling with the Commission's system.
It's better now because I'm out of the Commission system, which did not
There's a
agree
whole
with
lesson
that.
right there, isn't there?
But I'm afraid I missed part of the discussion.
It's fine, not to worry. We were talking about the dynamics of reporting, and Bertram was mentioning 6% bureaucracy cost and how it's so difficult for SMEs in particular, and how the global reporting burden for SMEs is problematic as well. But just in terms of the concrete impact of the CSDDD, CSRD, and the EU Taxonomy, Dan, what do you think is going to be the concrete outcome of this, and how do you think SMEs in particular will benefit as this unfolds?
Thank you. Look, first of all, maybe just to clarify that as CSDDD is concerned, the SMEs are not in the scope. So, what I've just heard of SMEs having to go down the value chain, I mean, that's not that what the CSDDD requires from SMEs. So the responsibility of due diligence through the value chain, in particular the supply side of the value chain, is with the large companies in scope. Actually, even in the directive as initially adopted last year, but even more with the omnibus, there are very specific safeguards to prevent the transfer of compliance burden to smaller business partners in the value chain. So basically, the companies that do due diligence, the large ones, they have to go to the place in the value chain where the impacts are and not burden the intermediaries in the value chain. In particular, low risk smaller business partners should not be even asked for information that necessary really for due diligence. So that to set a bit the record straight when it comes to CSDDD, because honestly, I'm not aware, and I've talked to is aware of any due diligence legislation out there that's more SME friendly. I would say even business friendly in general, because it had many facilities. But with the omnibus, we strengthened these guarantees. We expand some of them to small mid caps as well. So this cap on what information can be requested from them on a routine. And in general, as I was saying, I'm not sure if the message passed completely, but we are trying to find the right balance that we steer our industry towards the sustainability transition required for the future, and which is essential, is a component of our competitiveness long term, but also without necessarily burdening them. And we are trying to avoid as much as possible any red tape or really unnecessary reporting. On the other pieces, I will probably not go into much detail because I'm not in charge with CSRD and taxonomy, but happy to continue the discussion on those as well if necessary.
Lucas, in Austria, Lucas, what do you hear from your businesses? What do they want to see out of this reform? What do they need in this moment of global destabilization? And the burden of compliance is a critical issue on the political landscape now. Have we gone too far, or have we gone too far too fast? What are you being told by your constituents?
Actually, exactly that. We went too far and too fast. That's why we have to redraw everything. And I want to share with you that's not about Austria alone. I think in my constituency, this is something, if people are listening, I mean, people in politics, from the Commission, from the Parliament, people would be listening to entrepreneurs, to managers, to business people, also to employees, to all parts of the business sector, then they will hear a lot of distrust towards the European level. And this is harmful, especially for our unity, for our democracy. It goes far beyond only this or that regulation. And this is what I also want to share with Dan from the European Commission. We are not yet there. It's not yet the case that business representatives would share the opinion that it's getting better now. They don't yet have this confidence because we are not yet there. We only have proposals for omnibus. We are not yet there in the parliament, in the council, in the trilogue. We are not yet there in overcoming golden plating. This was not yet mentioned before when the national level was addressed. Of course, that exists also not only in Austria, but also in other parts of the European Union. And since the expression of the SME shield was rightly mentioned, of course, because we need it, but we must not forget how ironic paradox it is in the end, tragic, ironic, that we need a shield for SMEs against our own regulation, obviously. So a lot went in the wrong direction. I have colleagues in the European Parliament who do not have the approach to make it better. They do have the approach to withdraw regulations like CSDDD, CSRD. I'm not for withdrawing them for a very specific and clear reason, because then we would have 27 different regulations in 27 different member states, and the situation would not get better. It would even get worse if we would have this diversity of different regulations in the member states. But we have to be quick and we have to be clear in providing more freedom beyond any ideological approach for prosperity for the future.
Thank you. Sophia, SMEs having to deal with 27 investors looking at 27 markets, 27 different compliance issues for SMEs. This is nearly impossible in the modern age to find investors who are willing to do that. I was at a conference here in the defense sector last week, and they spoke specifically about this, that they find it too complex. Europe's not competitive enough. And they need a simplification before they're willing to invest. What do you hear from your members? Are they optimistic that the Commission and Parliament are going to get this right, or do they want, as Lucas said, some people want to withdraw completely from this? What's the mood?
No, I think we are trying to work towards being optimistic, but indeed there's a lot to do. And I think some of the comments made so far were very interesting. And as Mr. Mendel just mentioned, this SME shield against our own regulation, I think it shows how we have to change the way we create legislation. I mean, in the EU better regulation guidelines, we have, I think, small first principle that we barely apply. And if we started creating legislation on the basis of what smaller companies can do, and then adding layers of obligations, of requirements according to the resources of the companies, according to their impacts, then it would be way more workable. While at this moment, we create legislation for the bigger ones, and then we start thinking about mitigating measures or excluding SMEs from the scope. And when the Commission mentions that SMEs are not in scope of due diligence, so there should not be any issue, I think it shows that there is a problem between how we draft legislation, how we think about them, and how it's thought about on the market. And the reality is that SMEs will always be impacted by EU legislation because they are in the supply chain. So thinking that we just exclude them from the scope and then everything's fine, it's not true. So we have to make sure that as soon as we create requirements for companies, we have to have SMEs in mind, and we have to make sure that the text is very clear, because we can say that indeed in the first text of due diligence, SMEs were out of scope, but the reality is different. And this is what I mentioned, that the simplification agenda is about clarification. And now in the Parliament and in the Council, we will have to work on, I think, the most important article of the Due Diligence Directive, on Article 8 and identification of chain of activities. And this is where we have to be extremely clear of how companies in scope have to carry out their due diligence obligation. And it has to be clear that it's not by sending questionnaires to SMEs in the supply chain, but by first doing this scoping exercise internally with information that they have in-house, and then indeed taking actions where risks are. And that should not, the burden should not fall on European SMEs if we are very clear in the text.
Sophia, let me just ask, this is not a new problem in Brussels where big industry has the ear of the institutions. I'm not just going to blame the Commission here. Business Europe does a great job for its members, so we can't blame them for doing that. But there is a problem with SMEs who make up the largest backbone of European industry, and they don't get a seat at the table, which many people would describe as sufficient. Why are we still talking about this? Why has this not been corrected after such a long time of the problem having been identified? Sophia?
I think the why we should ask the institutions, but I really want to believe that finally we reach a moment where we finally have in mind the emergency that we can see entrepreneurs are really struggling at the moment. We have the simplification agenda on the table. We have to keep that as a priority for the coming mandate. And again, it's not about deregulating. It's about looking at what we have, the rules that we have, what we are asking companies to do and to comply with, and making sure that it's still fit for purpose, first of all, and that it's feasible. And when we speak about regulatory burden, indeed, a lot comes from reporting obligation. And the problem of reporting obligations is that it's really difficult for SMEs to see the use. And again, we have to think that it's resources. It's a lot of resources for entrepreneurs. And it means most of SMEs are micro companies. So it means that the entrepreneur himself is doing all the job. And the problem is that those entrepreneurs would gladly take some time to think about how to be more sustainable, how to train their staff better, but then they don't have the time because they have to draft those reports. So it's all those issues that we have to fix and that I hope we will keep as a priority for the next mandate.
Kira and Linda, I'm going to take some questions from the audience. Well, Kira, a constituency question again as well, like we give to Lucas. So what are you hearing from your constituents? And the balance in terms of the Greens as well. Is enough being done? Did too much happen too fast? How do you think this should be rebalanced in the context of what you hear from your constituents?
Well, I think I come from a country, Denmark, where the Greens were the biggest in the European election. So I think also Denmark is a special case compared to some other countries. But so what I'm hearing from my constituency is, like, we have a foundation of companies who've gone at the forefront of the green transition, like Ørsted, Vestas, like some of these renewable energy companies that's really made a business case out of fulfilling the policy goals that we've asked them to do, which is to meet the climate transition and the climate targets. So for them, the big ones, they're very concerned that the competitive advantage that they had been building by being first movers are now being lost. My sense is that it's a bit the same from Sweden and from Finland, where a lot of these companies, also very, very big multinational companies, are afraid that this will in the end be a competitive disadvantage. Then, of course, then there are the smaller companies, because I think we need to be honest as well that there are a difference of opinion based on whether you're a small or a bigger company and who bears the burden and in which way. Who are concerned about whether they can fulfill the targets and the reporting requirements. And I think there I fully share that we need to look at how can we do reporting in a better way, how can we digitalize it. But I think what is important also to keep in mind that this is also the responsibility of the member states to transition their economy into a more digitalized economy, to provide the guidance and the methodologies that they are bound to by the trialogue agreements, and for the Commission and for EFRAG to do simplification, which I think if we gave them the time, they would be able to do in a better way than what we are doing now, where no one knows again what we're gonna report on. And I think one thing we also need to take away, because I share a bit the concerns from Mr. Mandel, that we end up having different approaches in different member states that we need to be aware of. Because one thing is that now we're all talking about simplification and burden reduction, but we also know that in politics it goes super fast, and reducing bureaucracy is one of the most difficult political exercises to do. All politicians try to do it, but it's difficult. And if we do it in a rushed way, where we don't have impact assessments, where we don't have stakeholder involvement, we risk failing and creating an even bigger mess.
Thank you. Lena, the idea that we go too far too fast and we leave others behind, but Kira just spoke about losing the competitive advantage as well that was being built up. How do you see this? Do you think that those companies that maybe sit tight continue on the path they've been going with their sustainability agenda, being the first and the leaders in this, that actually the markets might respond to that in the medium term, if not the short term, that they are more transparent, they are more dependable, that that path is more predictable as well. And ultimately, in the end, we don't have a choice but to do this, otherwise the planet fries. So, is this a matter of staying the course, not losing our heads over this, but as Kira mentioned, doing this just better, making it easier for businesses to report?
Well, I think it's not the either or. I think that those actors in the market that can and value the competitive edge that they get on financial markets by making public information about their sustainability will clearly continue to do so. But we are not only talking about, because one thing that was mentioned here earlier was, of course, banks will invest in solar. And I think we need to remember that investors are different, but the technologies are also different. Solar, we know that solar is sustainable, but there's a lot and a range of different solutions and technologies that we actually don't know specifically, because they have different contributions to sustainability in different contexts and settings. And for companies, especially who might not be in that bracket of already being sustainable and wanting to expand their portfolios, we actually have a lot of companies who need to transition. And for those companies trying to attract investors when there is no roadmap into what path, for example, they should choose to decarbonize. Here, for example, if you go into heavy industry, there are a range of different solutions. And here there is no kind of guidance for the investors on where exactly they should be placing their investments. And in that situation, I think we will risk either those companies who want to be first movers in their sector to actually being disadvantaged competitively by trying to attract those investors because they cannot make available the information of where they are. But at the same time, I think that the investors might be more risk averse because they don't trust the information or don't know exactly how to evaluate the information that they're getting.
Okay, thank you. Let's take some questions. First one from Zombor Vakan to our MEPs. What are your insights and views about the CSRD Wave 1 member state level implementation pause as outlined in the Council Presidency compromise texts? Lucas, do you have an opinion on that?
It was necessary and very important that we made the stop the clock procedure happen, because again, it would have been ironic if we would have regulation in place and due, which would be already outdated the day it becomes due. So it's part of this process of repairing what was wrong in the last mandate. And I'm not here to criticize the last mandate. I look towards the future, but we must take care that things like that, regulation, over-regulation, even more regulation, that this can happen again. I mean, we really have economic problems on a major level. This must not happen again. And this is why to care for freedom and to care for what Montesquieu has called, if it is not necessary to make a law, then it would be necessary to not make a law. And this is a principle we have to follow in the future in order to provide the European economy with the necessary freedom.
Thank you. Kira?
Well, I would say on the stop the clock, I would expect member states to implement it, because even if you disagree with EU law, you need to implement it. And we need also in this mess of chaos to ensure some kind of level playing field between the companies operating in member state A, B, and C. With that being said, from the Greens EFA side, we believe that this is also like, now I've been a member of the European Parliament for 6 years. I think Lucas has a few more years than me, but I've never seen so messy legislative processes, to be honest. Like doing a fast track procedure, presenting a legislation, no impact assessment yet again, even though we have a principle of better regulation, then having to stop the clock on legislation that's already entered into force, and where some companies are already collecting data for that year, and then trying to adopt it before the end of the year, while knowing that the positions are very far away. To be honest, I think it's quite. I'm missing the English word for it, but I find it a little bit horrific that the Commission can present something like this, because it throws everyone into chaos, both the parliamentary institutions, being the Parliament or the member states, and the businesses who need to figure out how to do. So that's on the content of the Stop the Clock. But with that being said, I do hope and I expect that the member states will implement it quite fast, because it's now EU legislation.
Okay, thank you. Dan, did the Commission panic here? Were they just trying to scramble to get stuff pulled together?
Well, we hear all of this, and of course, this is a fast-tracked, politically driven process, so there's no hiding it. I just want to say that, look, at the center of it throughout, and as far as CSDDD is concerned, I would say from the outset, are the ideas of being risk-based, proportional, and reasonable. So, when I hear, and indeed I hear some of the criticism about the legislation of the past, I think for CSDDD it's a bit unfair, because it never got into application, not even transposed. So it suffered a bit from the halo effect of some experiences with national legislation or with other sustainability level, but limited experience by and large. And although argues this new generation of law that is more reasonable, more proportionate, more risk-based. Now, of course, I hope that the co-legislator will find the right way forward, and indeed, time is pressing, but also because the issues are pressing. We have many years to think it and to find the right way forward. We had an attempt. We are now trying to improve. The sustainability challenges will not appear, and the competitiveness will also be here. So the better solution we find, the faster. I think it would for all business in Europe and for.
Thank you, Dan. A question from Megan Richards. What are the sectors that would benefit most from simplification, that would be easy to implement and have the greatest immediate impact on SMEs? Bertram, you want to have a stab at that? So the sectors that would benefit most from simplification, that would be easy to implement and have the greatest immediate impact on SMEs.
Simplification of CSDDD and CSRD. It's very simple. Let me take up the helicopter, but we are in danger of losing our industrial base over all these international turmoil which we have, the going away of a rule-based world economy, change to the power-based world economy. And if we ask our member companies, mainly SMEs, what is the biggest burden, almost everyone says the biggest burden is bureaucracy, and it's too much. So if you are a very large company, you can relocate quite easily. So you can move out. Smaller company can't. So it's simplification, not deregulation. And in my sector, simplification with a omnibus helps immediately. And then you just said that there's no real experience with the CSDDD. We had a similar law in Germany for a little bit more than a year, and we noticed that what we call drip down effect. Whoever supplied, even if you have a small company, you supply to very large companies, they demand the reporting. So you were in. So it was not a perfect world. Even if according to the law, you were not covered by the law, your customers demanded for it. So we need the SME shield to recreate that perfect world. So our sector, the biggest industrial employer, would benefit tremendously from that simplification. We are not looking for deregulation, but simplification as we see in the omnibus. And by the way, I recently visited the United States and talked to a lot of constituencies, like companies, like the administration. And of all the partners I've heard, I tried to discuss tariffs. And I said, how could the EU work with the tariffs? And everybody I spoke to told me, well, it's non-tariff barriers. I asked, what are the non-tariff barriers of the EU? And everybody told me it's CSDDD, it's CSRD, it's CBAM, it's deforestation regulations. They see that as the biggest regulation against SMEs. And I just had to say it's the same for us, because SMEs cannot escape. So we're dependent on that.
Just on the US there as well, I think a lot of Europeans tend to look at the US as some kind of paradigm of virtue when it comes to bureaucracy and deregulation. Now, for sure, there's a wave of deregulation coming, but you're dealing with 50 states plus little DC, which doesn't even get the status of a state. And each of these states has significantly different regulations in different markets as well. Bertram, how do you find it dealing with the US in these terms? And are there lessons for Europe to learn in terms of simplification and gaining a competitive edge when it comes to competing with the US?
I mean, we have to compete in a worldwide market. And in the end, I'm not here to lecture the United States. The last thing I would want is some guy with a chainsaw running around. I'm a big fan of democracy and democratic processes. And I would like to quote Nico Lang of the Munich Security Conference, who said, the only chance we have is European strength. And how do we create European strength? By creating the best environment for our businesses to strive. And I work in a B2B environment. I'm not a B2C person, and my member companies are not B2C. There might be a value for the stamp supply chain law applies to this jacket, which enables you to sell it better, to sell it at a better price. On an international level, if a tooling machine is labeled like that, it's no additional value in there. So we have to create a good environment where companies can reinvest in innovation, where companies can reinvest in growth and not in filling out forms and not paying chartered accountants all day to create reports that in the end nobody reads. I have a friend who runs a company of around 2,500 employees, so a little bit more than an SME. He showed me his CSRD report, 180 pages in colorful print, and he told me he had to pay close to 100,000 euros for it. That's not a world where an SME would like to live in.
Making chartered accountants great again, not a vote winner, I think. Anybody else want to take this question on simplification on SMEs?
Maybe
Kira?
if I can add something.
Go ahead, Sophia.
Sophia, go ahead.
Thank you very much. SME United is a horizontal organization, so we work with all kinds of sectors and discussing with our members. Actually, there's so many different parts that we can look into, because at the end of the day, it's not one specific legislation. It's not one specific sectorial obligation. It's really about the cumulative impact of all legislation. So that's one thing to look at. And also we are working with our members on where burdens are really heavy. And actually, it's not only sustainability reporting, it's GDPR, it's consumer law, it's taxation issues. So I think we should have this kind of holistic approach, prioritizing all together the issues, looking at the barriers that SMEs are facing, and then trying to work on that. But it has to be a horizontal work on different pieces of legislation.
Thank you, Kira.
I very much agree with Sophia on this point, that it's also a discussion on how do we generally want to do legislation from both a European and a national level, and not just making one piece of legislation the savior of everything or the fault of everything. And then building up a bit on that, I think for me, what is the main driver for simplification, which I still keep being frustrated that we haven't met, is the whole aspect of how do we harmonize our rules, how do we do proper and uniform implementation of EU legislation in member states, how do we ensure that regional and local communities don't add up on that legislation or make a lot of different amendments to it, making it more difficult to operate cross-border. How do we also, like I work a lot in the field of tax and taxation, and here we also still have 27 different systems. So if you're operating in more than one member state as a company, you need to do several tax reporting and have different tax bases when you do your accounting. So I think a lot of it is also to just ensure harmonization of our legislation, enforcement and implementation. And then I think what we need to be aware of is that even though the transition is difficult now, we need to make companies that are fit for the future and not fit for now, because we still have a climate crisis, we still have an innovation gap, we have a lack of skills. So we need to, and of course, some of it is done by legislation, some of it is done by other things, but we can't just keep status quo and saying, for example, we don't need a greener business community, because it's clearly stated by science that we do need companies, not just in Europe but worldwide, to find better solutions for the climate crisis. Otherwise, we're just going to have new problems in 10 years.
Thank you. Question from Vicky Can from Corporate Europe Observatory. Regulation helps to reduce environmental, social, community, worker harm, and is part of the price of doing business, not something to lobby against. CSDDD shifts burdens onto business, and that is appropriate. Anything to add to Vicky's comment there, Lena?
Well, I think what has already been mentioned several times here is to find that balance. I agree that there is definitely a part of that, which is that companies themselves needs to pay for part of how they are influencing the world. You know, we have this concept of double materiality that we're trying to introduce as well. Of course, whether or not that cost in full needs to go to the companies and what the cost itself also is something that I think needs to be discussed, and really is that fabric of finding the balance.
We have a lot of questions now, so I'm just going to pick one or two people to answer these as we go through. If anybody else wants to comment, just let me know quickly. So this is from Mirka Kara. Mirka says, could you please elaborate more, probably with some examples regarding the supply chain tracking, in order for us to be able to quantify the burden for manufacturers and SMEs? Bertram and Sophia he request here as well. So Bertram, can you elaborate some examples on supply chain tracking where we can get this right?
Yes, and I think it's a good follow-up for the question we just had. We do not try to lobby against our responsibility in taking care of our workers and in taking care of the well-being of everybody who's involved in the supply chains. So we are ready to take that responsibility, but it's a matter of what can we really do. For example, let me take my valves. If I purchase a manufactured group somewhere in the world, there might be a circuit board inside, there might be a casting inside, there might be some plastic parts inside. I buy that assembled, produced somewhere in the world. The major partner I can deal it is my direct supplier, the tier one, we call it. But if you go down the elements in that integrated module, like take the circuit board, for example, where you have gold on the connectors, where you have some tin, where you have others, the further you go down the supply chain, the more difficult it will become to track down those issues. Take, for example, back to the mines where those metals would come from. And being a small company, a typical batch of valves I sell to my customers would be 12 valves, would be 4 valves, would be sometimes 20 valves. So I purchase in small quantities. And it's close to impossibility to track down the full supply chain up to the end. Whom do I know quite well? My tier ones. So I would gladly take responsibility for dealing with my tier one, for checking those companies. But am I really able to see through the whole supply chain of an integrated ready-made module? No. This might change if you have branches working with raw materials, for example, or working with very simple products like textiles or anything. But machinery and equipment maker are very complicated products, which also will probably not be produced by bad qualified persons in small quantities. So we take responsibility, gladly take responsibility, but there's a limit on how far we actually can see through the supply chain.
Sure, thank you. Sophia, anything to add there?
Yes, also to react on the fact that it's indeed the responsibility of companies. It's not about questioning that, it's also about, you have to imagine the frustration of European SMEs complying with EU rules and then being asked to make sure that other companies comply and to prove again that they comply, while we have market authorities, and that maybe we should also think about the resources that they have and the way they can do their job to make sure that it's everyone's responsibility, while at the moment some SMEs will feel like they have the whole responsibility of that. And on how to do that in a better way, I think the issue as well is that we ask companies to do all those due diligence obligation without really giving them the tools to do so. And one way, for example, in the omnibus proposal on the table, you have the possibilities for big companies in scope to go above the voluntary requirements for SMEs in case of plausible information. While this is where we have to be more clear and maybe provide companies with a list of what plausible informations are. We have OECD reports. The Commission is working on guidelines for due diligence. The Commission is working on a database under the legislation to ban products made with forced labor. So if we would have such a kind of exhaustive list of plausible information, that makes it more feasible for companies to comply. So it's really about making sure actually they can comply. While at the moment, we ask a lot without giving them the means to do so.
Thank you. Maybe Dan and Lucas take this next question. It's from Andrea Scherba. Central organizations of groups of independent retailers should be given the option to report on behalf of the member retailers that fall into the scope of the CSRD. Are policy makers willing to clarify this? Dan, any comment on that? Central organizations.
Again, it's a bit cumbersome for me to comment because I'm not in charge of the CSRD, and
Sure.
the is now with the co-legislators. So it's the Commission has put the proposal on the table already.
Can't hear you. Can we hear you, Lucas?
If it's my turn.
Yes, go ahead.
I guess, yes, absolutely. I nearly every day I hear about concerns regarding different pace and even different regulation in different sectors for the future. So we must take care not to stop with these two files, CSRD and CSDDD, really have to spread the whole idea of, let's call it simplification today, in all areas and in different files in order to avoid that the one or the other sector would be again discriminated in the one or the other way. And I also want to emphasize what has been said before. Small and middle-sized enterprises, of course, are affected also by the reporting rules that are meant to be for large enterprises, because large enterprises, in order to be on the safe side, also request from their small and middle-sized partners in the supply chain respective reporting. So it's really better to provide more freedom. And one of the questions from the audience was with regard to regulation and the positive aspects of regulation. There is no doubt, at least in my view, that good regulation provides freedom, good regulation provides fairness, and good regulation, of course, provides that Europe will uphold the values Europe stands for, including dealing with the planet, dealing with the climate change, and so on. But what was completely, let's say, what European Union under the last leadership completely turned a blind eye on was the problem of isolation of Europe, the problem of our international competitiveness, and this is what's at stake because China is growing and growing. America is playing a different game. There are advantages of the European business model, especially our reliability, especially our predictability, especially during this new US administration. We are the shining light maybe on the planet when it comes to factors like this, but when it comes to costs, when it comes to bureaucracy, when it comes to regulation burden, then we are not yet competitive. And this is why we have to work on the right way of regulation. And when it comes to dealing with climate change, we have to take others on board, the rest of the world, so to speak. Otherwise, we would isolate ourselves and not at all solve the problems that come along with climate change.
Lucas, do you think this is fixable, or is the European mindset just too complacent and complex to get this done quickly?
No, I'm pretty confident that it's fixable, and it's due to, as I've said in the very beginning of today's talk, due to better majorities, due to better focus of the European Commission, also clearer priorities of the portfolios in the mission letters for the commissioners and so on. We are on the right track here. I just wanted to share we are not yet there. We are not yet there that it would not be the usual thing what people in business would share with me and everybody, that they are not confident to the Commission. There's too much bureaucracy, there's too much centralism, there's isolation of Europe, there is no competitiveness to the outside, and so on. This has not yet changed. Politics might be in, let's say, the modus of change. There is even a shift of paradigms. That's what I share with companies every day, by the way. I share with them, please be confident and give credits to commissioners who do the right things now and propose the right things to the parliament, and we will make it even better in the parliament. This is also my confidence. So I'm confident, I'm optimist, but we are not yet there. This is what I wanted to share. There is a lot to do.
Thank you. Dan, question for you from Gabby Gregorius. Does the European Commission recognize the potential tensions for companies within the 2-year delay adopted, but the changes to the ESRS only coming after substantive changes are adopted? Does that question make sense to you?
Yeah, well, I know what it is about, and indeed it's a CSRD, European Reporting Sustainability Standards, ESRS, and I see the question. So indeed, we have proposed the changes already to the CSRD, while to simplify the reporting standard. This is also because the reporting standards are developed through a multi-stakeholder process. They are not issued by the Commission. So there is this body that has developed the first set of reporting standards and is trusted actually to develop to simplify now the ESRS. So it will take some time, but the direction of travel is clear from already from the omnibus and from the pledge made to simplify the reporting standard.
Thank you. Kira, question from Jay Christie. In today's tumultuous economic times, what global norm would result the same outcome without legislation, knowing that trade within the global south is greater than trading with Europe?
Can you repeat it quickly, Brian?
Sure. In today's tumultuous economic times, what global norm would result in the same outcome without legislation, knowing that the trade within the global south is greater than trading with Europe?
Well, I think if we, I'm not sure I understand the question correctly, but I think if we make sure that we are a reliable partner, that we are also an attractive partner for the global south, and I acknowledge there we also have a discussion to have, because what do we do as the EU when we have a lot of demands, a lot of good demands, but China has no demands and just comes with money? That of course makes it from a global South perspective difficult to then choose Europe. So there's a discussion to have had there. But I think what we can offer is that we can both ensure that credibility, ensuring that you are negotiating and doing businesses with the companies who are based on rule of law, who are democratic, who are not corrupt. So there's a lot of the governance structure that European businesses have that we can offer, and then as well to support the transition for global South, both when it comes to, for example, the climate adaptation solutions, but also a digital transformation and economic growth in general. So I think we do have a lot to offer, and we can, as European businesses, also help to push in the right way when it comes to, for example, saying, well, we have a value chain responsibility, so we won't accept child labor, for example, or we need you to use some other chemicals because the chemicals you're using are hurting the skin or the environment or so on. So I think we have a lot to offer. And then let me just end also by saying that I think what I'm missing a little bit is from this process on the omnibus, because I'm also the negotiator on the next omnibus on mid-caps. And there my impression is that the involvement of the different DGs, of the different stakeholders, of the political parties are much more present. And I think when we're looking back at those two processes, the sustainability omnibus and then the mid-cap paper reduction mid-cap, the process of the next omnibus will be much better because the Commission took its time. And because it didn't become this symbolic, now we need to find a solution before a national election in Germany and so on. So I think we can do it in a different way where we ensure the principles of better regulation.
Thank you. Question for Lena from Professor Jay Scott, who's a senior fellow at CEPS and professor at EUI. Professor Scott says, survey results from PwC 2024 show that businesses expect gains from CSRD in competitiveness. How do we know that reducing by 80% firms that reply is actually beneficial on balance? The question.
Well, I don't think reducing 80% is beneficial in general. So our position is very much that we should not be reducing the scope of the company's reporting by 80%. So it's not, I think, but I'm not sure if that was the question.
It seems to hit the target. Kira also did a great job on unpacking the previous question. Dan, do you want to answer there? Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to add that, look, what is removed through reduction in scope is the obligation to report. But the companies have an advantage, and we actually expect some of them will see an advantage in reporting on sustainability because it is relevant, for instance, for investors or for their consumers. So certainly the omnibus does not prevent them from reporting on sustainability.
Thank you. We're coming close on our time. We're going to try and clear these remaining questions and then do a wrap up in a few moments. Lucas has to jump off in a few moments, I understand as well. So Lucas, specific question for you here. I know you stay as long as you can. What changes from Robert Francis? What changes would the EPP like to see in the omnibus? Audio, you on mute? No, can our team check there? Go ahead. There we go.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Since parliamentarism is literally about talking, it's good to be unmuted. Thank you for that. Actually, it's about data points. So it's a very technical discussion, but the question, even if there will remain reporting obligations, and I say again, there are absolutely reasonable colleagues who do not want to have the CSDDD and CSRD at all. They want to withdraw it. I don't want to withdraw it in order to avoid this diversity of different regulation. But when it comes to the reportings, the number of data points is one of the biggest concerns colleagues in EPP would have in order to reduce data points that are relevant for reporting, and this is especially important for small and middle-sized enterprises, and the so-called SME shield, which again is, of course, an ironic thing, but obviously necessary. This shield should avoid small and middle-sized enterprises being, for obvious reasons, targeted by their larger partners. These are among the EPP priorities, and under the leadership of Jürgen Warborn in the European Parliament, I'm pretty confident that we can not delete but dilute omnibus, as also Jürgen Warborn always states.
Nice soundbite. Thank you for that. Question for Sophia from Irene de Smit. What concrete initiatives for SMEs United are undertaking to support SMEs in their sustainability transition, capacity building, and other tools, for example? Sophia?
It's a lot of work, obviously. First of all, we are working with our members on the ground to make sure they have the necessary information that they can then work with SMEs, train SMEs, and to focus on the sustainability reporting. SM United has been working a lot with EFRAG to develop this voluntary standard for SMEs so that they can answer the questionnaires of their supply chain. And let me insist on the importance of this voluntary standard for SMEs. It has been developed with large companies, with banks, with financial authorities, with SMEs. So this voluntary standard for SMEs is the process of a very long work. And although we still find it quite complex for SMEs under certain aspects, it's extremely important that it remains the cap in the value chain as it is suggested at the moment in the omnibus. We've been working to develop a feasible standard, and it's important that we have the recommendation of the Commission anytime soon to ensure the market acceptance of this standard so that we can continue training our SMEs in using the standard and making sure that we can somehow force companies in scope and banks to only use the VSME and to stop sending thousands of different questionnaires to SMEs.
Last question for Lucas and Kira, and then Lucas is gone. Kira, this one's all yours. To Lucas and Kira, what is your view and thoughts on the fact that businesses and stakeholders may feel, Lucas is back. What is your thoughts on the fact that businesses and stakeholders may feel uncertain about investing in their sustainability work, concerned that the rules could change significantly again in the next mandate period? Kira first.
Well, I think it's a shame. Once again, I think the uncertainty that we're creating, both for companies' investments, for the people working in sustainability who've just met the demands from policymakers. I think it's very much a shame. So and I'm frustrated about that. And I don't know. Of course, there is always the risk or the possibility that legislation will change again. But I think what for me stood as the European ideals as well was that even though we've disagreed, we've come to a compromise and we stick to that compromise also in the next legislature. So I'm worried that this omnibus is also going to set a precedent for revising EU legislation in each parliamentary term, just like we see some member states doing it, and that will just create uncertainty for all. So I'm calling on both Lucas and I and all our colleagues to ensure that doesn't happen. And then once again, I welcome the fact that the Commission believes that some member states might still report, but I think setting a precedent where we don't do impact assessment on what does it mean for cost, for data, for investments, for carbon emissions, when we exempt 80% of our legislation, I just think is bad lawmaking, to be honest. And I think this is something we should all take very seriously, that if we want good legislation, which I would say the EU is quite known for compared to member states, it also requires us to do impact of the legislation that we propose.
Thank you. Lucas.
Yeah, thanks for the question, which is very important. And of course, I agree with Kira in principle. There must be predictability, there must be certainty, there must be reliability also, let's say, over over periods and mandates of the legislature. But in this case, we have the situation that we followed the wrong path for some time. For me, it's not about, it's rather about whether it's right or wrong. And if we follow the wrong path for some time and it takes efforts to go back in order to continue the right path again, then we have to take the efforts to go back rather than to continue the wrong path. But I will not stand away from a very clear position. I don't want to put too much sentiment in here, but I mean, in fact, over-regulators of the last mandates should rather apologize to those who have taken means and measures in order to follow the rules which were there or which were about to come. It was just a wrong regulation. We can learn from it, and we will continue the right path, and then the really positive development of investments, of innovation, of reindustrialization of Europe, of course, in a climate-friendly way, of overcoming the struggles that come along with demographic winter and so on. Then these things will come. For the time being, we are still in the mode of repairing something.
Thank you. Very nice summary. Let's go to our wrap up. So 30 seconds from each of our panelists. Dan, we'll kick off with you. Take away from today.
Well, my takeaway that indeed sometimes we all learn, and there may be room for fight and for adapting to changing circumstances. However, the direction remains the same because the long terms are the same. And basically what this is about is making sure that the way business is not at odds with what we value as a society, and it doesn't undermine our other objectives as a society. So be more efficient ways to do it, and we're always willing to. I don't think fine-tuning leads to uncertainty or to wasted investment, because in the end the direction is still the one that was foreseen in the beginning, and we look forward again to finding the right balance, proportion, reasonable solutions.
Thank you, Dan. Lena, 30 seconds.
Yes. Thank you. I think my takeaway here is at least that there's some agreement, some disagreement, but it seems like there at least is agreement on it is not having a gradual approach and looking into reducing administrative burdens is something that there seems to be agreement on, but at the same time, the scope of which and the extent of which there is not agreement on. I think we need to look into and make sure that we acknowledge that one size does not fit all. And for this, as has been mentioned by several, Mr. Madden in particular, we might need to backtrack and change. But I need to make sure that that also includes keeping the ambition clear. And I think if we're talking about European competitiveness and wanting to make sure that we stay the course and become competitiveness in this uncertain geopolitical times, we need to be the predictable ones. This is not predictable, and neither has the taxonomy or sustainability reporting process been, because there is a pattern here of last minute changes being made that actually alters the intention and the effect of the legislation. So I think this is a great opportunity to take back that control and that power to make sure that we lay a path ahead for sustainability reporting in the EU that will actually strengthen competitiveness, and that we don't shift focus from one administration to the next.
Thank you. Sophia, 30 seconds.
Yes, I think I was happy to hear that indeed we're all on the same page when it comes to legal certainty, and this is extremely important for European SMEs. I think we also all agree that simplification must be reached and that there is an emergency. So now I guess I would be more talking to MEPs here in the panel that we have to act not too fast indeed to make sure that we deliver a qualitative legislation, but fast enough so that we provide SMEs with answers and with legal certainty. And then on the Commission side, continuing working together, working with stakeholders and business organizations to continue delivering on the simplification agenda.
Thank you, Sophia. Lucas.
I want to, in particular, commend what Kira has stated today, because I think this was very compromise-oriented, very reasonable. It's not up to me to judge that, but I have my experiences with people from other political groups, colleagues, who state things like, I take it personal that they stopped the clock and it will be redrawn because I have negotiated it and I see it as my piece of art and things like that. This will not lead us anywhere. We have to keep up a good spirit of compromise, and this is what Kira provided, and this again strengthens my confidence in the parliamentary process. Secondly, the omnibus proposal is much better than dense internet connection. I'm happy about that. And thirdly, I thank the business representatives in today's call for their clear messages, which are important not only for businesses. This is what we have, I guess, to emphasize all the time. It's about wealth. It's about also the social welfare systems of Europe, which depend on prosperity and strong businesses and a strong economy. It's also about our ability to defend ourselves, about our resilience, about risk diversification, about competitiveness worldwide, and avoiding isolation. And this is what we, thanks to your active, could, and thanks to you, Brian, we could excellently outline today. So thank you for that.
Very kind, thank you. And Dan, thanks for sticking with us today with all the technical challenges earlier. Let's go to Kira now. Kira.
Yeah, thanks for the nice remarks, Lucas. I had prepared to say how horrible the omnibus was as my ending, but I guess that is what hugging your enemy does to one. No, but thanks for a good conversation, and I think I echo what many of the others have been saying. I think for me, the aim is to ensure easy applicable legislation that hits the aim. The aim for me being responsible business conduct, both when it comes to the climate transition, but also human rights and social standards. And we need predictability. We need good data. Otherwise, we're just back to the issue and the conflicts around greenwashing. So having this in mind when we do this omnibus regulation is crucial. I think also keeping in mind the link between the small, the medium, the mid cap, and the big companies is going to be important, because the legislation we have affects them in different ways. And then moving forward, ensuring that no matter what we politically believe about the content of EU legislation, we need to ensure that it's good legislation with quality, that we do impact assessments, that we do stakeholder involvement also when it's annoying, and that we ensure proper evaluation so that we have a legal certainty of the quality of our legislation. Thank you.
Kira. Thank you, Kira. Bertram, last word.
Thank you. First, we should try not to mix sustainability with reporting demands. We create sustainability by technology. Our member companies offer, as per today, technology which could reduce 86% of carbon dioxide emissions. 86% with today's technologies. Exporting regulations did not work as the previous Commission wanted to do. And we have noticed that it's a major obstacle for our domestic companies in Europe, as well as for foreign companies wanting to deal here. And in that case, how could we make these companies stronger again in Europe so that they purchase the technology which is already there, is to create a thriving business environment. The omnibus, therefore, is welcomed because it corrects what I could call bad lawmaking without getting rid of reporting and documentation. If we get rid of 600 data points, reduce them by 80%, it's still 120 data points, which also SMEs will report on. So not getting rid of all reporting, but make it more feasible. That's the compromise I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. So go digital, dilute, don't delete. I think that sums up a large part of what we discussed today. Thank you so much to our gender balanced panel. I want to make a note of that. Euractiv always tries to get gender balance, not always possible. We do make a huge effort to try and be consistent with that as well. Keep sending your remarks to #EA Debates. Our social media team will continue to interact after the program. With that, our thanks to our production team, who you don't see, but this doesn't happen without them. Today we had Anna, Pablo, and Zoran, and the events team as well. as a huge team sitting beside the European Commission, invisible to most of you, but this is the daily work of part of Euractiv as well. And we want to thank VDMA for their support for the program as well. This is a really critical part of the policy discussion network in Brussels as well. So from Washington, D.C., the land of the free, I wish you a good afternoon in Brussels. We're just getting started here. More deregulation to come by the end of the day for sure. And thank you for joining us. Our audience has been exceptionally interactive today. We really appreciate all the questions. Please keep them coming. So good day. Brian Maguire.